is this? Oh, we
This
haven't
meeting
seen
shall
the
come
half
to
of
order
it.
at 6 o'clock on July 8th,
Chantel.
2015. Would you call the roll, please?
He does my job.
Been busy. Here we go. Adams.
Here.
Jones. Here. Separati.
Here.
Jackson.
Here.
Brownlee.
Here.
Tujanski.
Here.
Agee.
Here.
Albers.
May I have a motion to temporarily adjourn this meeting to allow the county auditors to speak to us on the financial recovery plan?
So move. Second.
Okay.
Mr. Jackson and Tujanski.
Okay. Adams.
Roll.
Adams. Jones. Yes. Separati.
Yes.
Jackson.
Yes.
Brownlee.
No.
Tujanski.
Yes.
Agee. Yes.
Good. Thank you, Board, for that opportunity. And we've also got some of the folks that we worked with in January at the very beginning of all of this. So we are going to hear just a little bit of the process, and then we will ask questions. And we are talking maybe half hour at the most. Anita Hendricks is our lady in blue.
Another lady in blue.
Laura. Yes.
Well, it's nice seeing everyone tonight. We're with the Auditor of State's office, and in front of you, I'm hoping, and I see it right there with the seal, is the report that was put together, the fiscal watch analysis. And what we want to do today is go over what caused Maple Heights to go into fiscal watch, the analysis itself, and then answer any questions you might have, and then also talk about the recovery plan. What the requirements of the recovery plan, what needs to be in the recovery plan, and again, answer any questions that you might have. Okay, I'm going to ask you please to turn to page 6, if you would.
I took out the blank pages.
Okay, so page 6 at the bottom. Ohio Revised Code is very specific. Okay, we look at 4 conditions for fiscal watch, and each of those conditions is addressed in this analysis. The first condition is accounts payable, and we're going to steer you to the middle table there because that's what drove the analysis at the end of the year. You see there in the middle, Schedule 2, where it lists 3 different funds: general, ambulance billing, and capital improvement. What that table is telling us is very simply, the code says do a payable listing for anything over 30 days. There were 3 funds that had payables over 30 days. The next column is the fund balance that's available to pay those. And those funds did not have balances available to pay them. So that just says basically column A minus column B gives you your payables in excess of the available balance. The code then says take 1/12 of the revenues that come in the door. So 1/12 of each of those funds is listed in that next column. And then we see if the revenues are enough to take care of the payables. And for 2 of them it was. Unfortunately, for the capital improvement fund, it wasn't. So that capital improvement fund had payables in excess of the money that was available. So that's what drove condition 1.
Should we hold questions, or can we ask them as you go?
Ask as you go, please.
Madam Chair, I direct your question.
You go right ahead.
The 1/12 of available funds for the general fund,
Yes.
is that number 1,154,000?
It is that.
Okay. The payables over that fund is only 216,000.
At the end of the analysis is always done at the end. So this was done December 31st of 2013. The revenue number that's used is, you're familiar with an amended certificate that goes with the county auditor's office or fiscal officer's office. It's 1/12 of the revenues on the amended budget.
Okay, so I'm just saying, it's not 1/12 of 216,000, but it's 1/12 of a number that's not shown on this sheet right
Yes,
now.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Okay, so that was condition 1. Condition 2 is on page 7. Schedule 3. Again, the code tells us exactly what to do. The first column lists cash balances that are in a deficit at the end of the year. You see ambulance billing has a positive, and the 3 of them have zeros, and we'll get into why those are there. The next column is less accounts payable and encumbrances, because that money's already spoken for. So you've got your fund balance, and you also have some payables and encumbrances out there where you already have an obligation for those bills. So you take column 1 minus column 2 to give you the adjusted aggregate sum of funds with deficit balances. Simply column A minus column B. So you list all those funds that have a negative situation. The next column, again, are revenues from a number that's not on here. 1/12 of the revenues from each of those funds that are in that listing. The general fund comes from the amended certificate. The other funds come from the actual revenues of that year, 1/12. And then we take column C, if you will, minus column D, because there's monies there that can pay those obligations, and we have negative balances on the far right. And you can see there's about 8 funds that fell into a deficit situation when we included the payables and encumbrances. So all those funds, one of them just needed to trigger it, but we had 8 that were in a deficit situation. So that was condition 2, and those funds triggered that condition to meet the fiscal watch. Okay, condition 3.
All right. Condition 3, let's go over to page 8, please. And for this condition, the code says we're going to look at your bank balances versus your fund balances. So up at the top, we have all the bank accounts of the city. We list those out, all the balances, and then we adjust those balances by anything that might have been going back and forth right at the end of the year. So deposits in transit, outstanding checks, and any other adjustments that hadn't impacted the bank balances yet. So we come to our total treasury balance, that $961,000 there in the middle. Then we take all the positive fund balances and subtract those. So that lists out all the positive funds of the city. And we come up with a treasury deficit down at the bottom of over 1.8 million. Then the code says, again, we take your receipt amount, the revenues, and we take 1/12 of that and compare it. And 1/12 of your revenues was just slightly lower than that deficit. So overall, there was a deficit of about $16,000, which again, because that was a deficit, the code says that qualifies the city for fiscal watch. Going over to page 9, the final condition, condition 4, is financial.
In this chart here, it's showing, you're comparing the cash balance to the positive fund balances. What does it mean that there's a disparity?
It basically means the difference between the two is your negative fund balances. So when you take all cash to the bank minus the positive funds, gives you the negative funds. That's all that's telling you.
That's a summation of all negative fund balances.
Right, that 1883 number at the bottom is basically the math that gives you your negative fund balances. And then you look and say, could 1 month of revenues cover those negative funds? And in this case, they could not.
It's like overdrawing your checking account in simple terms.
Similar, yeah.
Yeah, you're not bouncing checks, but you're definitely not in a good situation.
If everything that you owed, if you had to pay, you couldn't pay it.
That's correct.
Yeah.
All right, and then our last condition is condition 4. That's a financial forecast. Because the city met condition 1, 2, and 3, we did not need to do the forecast. If you had not met any of those, we would have done it to see if you would have met at that one. But since you already qualified, we didn't need to do that. So the city did meet conditions 1, 2, and 3. It was declared in the fiscal watch by the auditor of state. Are there any other questions on the report part of things before we move on?
Madam Chair, I just have a clarity, maybe for Irene too, or if anybody else knows. When we have a deficit in the capital improvement fund, isn't that normally money that's owed to us by the county for any kind of street improvement that we do that hasn't, we haven't received? So is that money, is there a possibility that that money could at least come in?
It could be timing, because a lot of times we have to pay out to be reimbursed.
Right. 'Cause
So
then
it
the
could
county was
be.
behind it, and I know that's a very small amount, but any little pennies help?
Right, but I mean, it could be timing. I don't know in this instance what it was, but it could be when you're being reimbursed.
Okay, all right. Now we want to talk about once the city's in fiscal watch, then what happens? What's the next step? So that's all spelled out in revised code chapter 118. And what the city's required to do is come up with a recovery plan. And for the rest of the night, that's pretty much what we're going to talk about. You have 120 days from the date you were declared. This was declared in April. So you have until August 8th to come up with that plan and submit that to the auditor's office. Our office will review that plan. If it isn't acceptable, you'll have 30 days to revise it and come up with something new. If you can't come up with anything by August 8th, or if you can't come up with an acceptable plan, the auditor could choose to elevate you to fiscal emergency instead of keeping you in fiscal watch. The plan under the code says that the plan is the mayor's plan. The mayor needs to come up with a plan. And then that plan has to be submitted to council, and you have to approve it through ordinance or resolution. And this all needs to happen by August 8th and be submitted. We found at other cities that it's really best if from the get-go, mayor and council work together. I mean, we've worked with one city where the mayor came up with this, what she thought was a great plan, gave it to council, and they just said no. Well, that wastes a lot of time, to be honest with you. So really, it's best if from the get-go, you can get together with the mayor and come up with ideas. You may not agree on everything, but if you can come up with some common ideas that are going to help the city, that would be great.
Laura, what would cause you to reject the plan?
Well, we're going to talk about what the plan needs to have.
Okay.
And if it doesn't have those things, that would lead us to reject. The main thing the plan needs to do is eliminate the condition that puts you into watch. You met all 3 of those conditions, but really all 3 of those are driven on the fact that you have deficit funds. They're all a little different, but the basic message is you had those 8 funds that met with deficits. So we need to find a way to fix that problem. It doesn't have to happen overnight, but the plan needs to show that you're going to have good progress and work towards that. How will we know if a plan's going to fix something? Well, the plan has to have a 5-year forecast to go along with it. And your finance director will work with you on that and preparing those numbers. But you have to show that over the 5 years, these deficits are getting smaller and things are getting better in all 8 of those funds. Okay.
At the end of that 5 years, plans to show a completely balanced budget.
The plan should show definite improvement. Sometimes it might take a little longer to eliminate all the deficits, but you should definitely see improvement in the balances. Those deficits should go down or be eliminated. If that would be fantastic.
And I'll say usually we don't like to see things that are kind of open-ended. We like to see specifics. So if you say to us, well, this won't be fixed in 5 years, but it will be fixed in 7, we've calculated, that we would probably accept because you have a definite plan and a timetable. If you just said, well, things are getting better and we hope things will get better sometime, that's not a great plan.
And for each item in the plan, usually plans have several different ideas. We want to see a start date, when that's going to happen. We want to see a dollar amount for what that idea is going to generate or reduce in expenditures. And so you'll have your idea, you'll have your date, you'll have your dollar amount. And then we have been assigned as fiscal supervisors, so we will monitor that plan and keep an eye on it and say, okay, you said you were going to put something on the ballot. Did you put it on the ballot? Yes. Did it pass? No. Or yes. If it did pass, fantastic. We're including keeping that in our forecast. If it didn't pass, okay, what are we going to do instead? What's going to take the place of that? So each idea has a dollar amount with it. It has a finite time of when it's going to be completed. And it goes in that 5-year forecast. Like Laura said, that is what you're going to want to look at. Irene's going to put together that forecast. You're going to want to see the effect of all those ideas in the plan.
I have a question. So while hypothetically we have this plan put together and so forth. Now, what services does your office, like I've looked at something like performance audit, like if council legislatively put something together in terms of we want to identify how the city is operating with the resources, whether it's personnel, salary, our tax base, are we using our monies efficiently? Are those things that the city, that the state auditor's office provides us for free that the council can utilize to identify ways to efficiently utilize our tax dollars?
As far as the performance audit, I don't know if you're in watch if they do it for free. That's something we would have to check on. I don't think so. I think they've cut back on that. But we could definitely have somebody from performance come and speak with you to kind of tell you what they could do for you. We do provide, LGS provides technical assistance. We're there to help, get books in order, get things balanced, help Irene in any way that she would need. Train counsel and anything they would like. That's one thing that we do a lot. We'll go and talk about budgetary law. We'll go and help, explain things and go over things if council would like that at any given time. We're here to help because our goal is to help you get financially back stable on your feet and we're out the door. But the plan is very, very critical.
And we also can provide you with sample plans from other cities that we've worked with, so you can see what they've done, and not everything you would do, but it might kind of start the brainstorming process. So we definitely can get you some examples if that'll help you.
And just let us know, send us an email, so we can get you some plans. But we want to just stress August 8th, deadline for this plan. Ideas have to have dates and dollar amounts and how it's going to fit into the forecast. Make sure when you vote on it, look at that forecast, look at the ideas. Hopefully you can work with the mayor. It makes life a little bit easier in the long run because you'll have,
The sample plan, can the mayor or council order that plan from the state?
To get copies of the
Yeah.
samples? Oh, absolutely.
Oh, yeah, we can.
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll leave president of council with my business card, and then we can communicate.
Just
Get your
plans.
copies of whatever you need.
It's good having one point person and then it could be shared with all of us.
And one thing
But we don't
about,
have to, I guess I'm saying we don't have to wait for the mayor or the administration to do something before we ask for
We
something,
can get you
like
that.
the sample plan. Okay.
good too. And one thing about plans too, we mentioned the August 8th deadline, and that is the deadline, but plans can be revised and probably will be revised. Like Nita talked about as an example, if you put a levy on the ballot, and that's a key part of your plan because it would generate a lot of dollars, goes to the voters say no. well then either you need to say, we're gonna put it back on one more time and try again, or you need to say, you know what, the voters have said no, we're gonna come up with X that generates some of those same dollars, or make these cuts that will save those same dollars. So it's kind of like your budget, in that you pass it by a deadline, but then in the future you can amend it as situations change.
We also have a couple of initiatives that if they do pass in the November election, the money does not kick in immediately. Is that going to be an issue, or is that a part of that 5-year forecast?
It's a part of that forecast. Your finance director will know when those monies kick in, and then what will happen is you'll see a budget that you're very familiar with looking at. Your revenues and your appropriations for 14. And then Irene's going to have all the different ideas in the plan and have dollar amounts with those below the budget line. And it'll show the effect. And that won't hit till 15 or 16 maybe, you know, depending on when it's going to hit. But it should hit in the appropriate year.
Well, there's also a chance that it doesn't hit until, like, say, with the property tax, and even Rita would take a while for it to generate. We're going to end up probably growing the deficit. I'm just going to stop there. We're not going to grow the deficit, waiting for the funds to come in that are supposed to patch the hole that we have.
We can't make things worse.
Okay.
That's one thing they're going to look for. You can't make things worse. And then you've got to have some things that are going to hit you right now.
So we need some immediate and then
Yeah.
long-term.
Yeah.
You're smiling. I know. I'm just trying to figure it out.
No, you never.
No, that's a good question.
Great question.
Yeah. And a lot of times people have to make some temporary cuts and expenses until that money would come in. And then if the money doesn't come in, those cuts may have to stay more long-term, or until you can figure out a new idea to do. That happens a lot.
But even in that 5-year scenario, I mean, if you got funds that's not coming in for 2-3 years down the road, it would show up in that 5-year plan, that 3rd year of the plan. The additional income was shown.
Right. And that's when it would start to get better, but you can't let it get worse up until that point.
Question, there's a piece of legislation that's before the council right now regarding, we have a rainy day fund, and we proposed a resolution is asking for us to transfer that to the general fund. Now, what is your thoughts on that?
The rainy day, we looked at the funds too, and we're like, well, the rainy day fund, it's kind of raining. And I don't know, it's raining in Maple Heights right now. So you look at how the fund was set up, what it was for, has the purpose been exhausted? Is this the purpose that it's for? If it is, and your law director's okay, and everything's good, I see no problem in moving that. A lot of different cities do that when they're in this.
Did you say moving that or removing that?
Moving into the general fund.
Moving is one thing, removing it
Oh,
is.
just taking it off,
Yeah.
we don't want to get rid of any money. No, I'm with you. Yeah, we want to move it.
So the bottom line is we don't want it. I'm sorry.
Anthony, go ahead.
We're facing, I think, close to $1.6 million. Does that budget have to be, that deficit have to be balanced by the end of the year? Or are you allowed to carry it over into the further, future years?
You can carry the deficit over, it just can't get any worse. So as long as you're spending only what you're bringing in the door, then we're fine. It's when you grow the deficit, that's the problem. But the goal would be to reduce it a little bit each year until it's gone.
Okay, so you don't have to come up with 1.6 right away, which is hard to do anyways, because I'm seeing here that we already have, with the appropriations, another increase in revenue, or spending in the revenue is 1.6 less. So we're talking close to $3 million.
No, you shouldn't, no, you don't want to make it worse. You don't want to increase the bleeding. You want to stop the bleeding, if you will. Spend within your means. And then these ideas need to reduce that deficit.
Any other questions? Any questions out there? Good? Okay. Go ahead.
If we were to transition
into fiscal emergency, what would that look like? Sometimes I think people are really afraid of it. I'm not sure if it's something we should exactly be afraid of, but what would happen if we went there?
Sure. Fiscal emergency is different than fiscal watch in that a commission is set up. It's a state commission, and it's made up of 7 people. It's going to be mayor, president of the council, 3 local business people that would be approved by the governor, and then there's going to be someone from Office of Budget Management and someone from the state treasurer's office. The person from budget management chairs the commission. They meet usually once a month, and they basically provide oversight of everything the city does financially. So council's still here, you still pass budgets and pass ordinances, but then things go on to the commission for their approval as well. And basically what they look to do is to make sure that, because you still have to do the recovery plan goes to them, they look to make sure that you're sticking to the plan.
What authority does that commission have? Can they like veto something? I mean, can they disapprove something?
Sure, if you submit the plan and it doesn't meet their requirements, they can say, you know what, Maple Heights, it's not cutting it, give it back. And you have, I believe 30 days to come up with another plan. If that doesn't cut it, then they can say, you know what, you haven't submitted an acceptable plan. They can hold your local government money. They can reduce your.
But is there some?
There's a whole lot of it. They can reduce your appropriations to 85% of the prior year. So if you spend $100, say in the general fund, they can make you spend 85 in that same month. So there's different things, and it's all spelled out. If there's any questions in 118 or Ohio Revised Code 118, it'll be under fiscal emergency, and it'll talk about the commission. But ultimately, the recovery plan is the driving force. That's what you have to come up with, regardless of if you're in watch or emergency. That plan's a pretty big deal. Something that's workable.
Right. Go ahead, Helen.
President. Now, if they come in, can they reduce wages and get into the contracts of the union people?
No,
Thank you.
In emergency though, the 7-person council, the 3 businessmen and 2 people from the state, does the city have to pay them to do that?
Not a dime.
So the city owners of the city, you'd have to find somebody who's willing to do this work
Yes.
for free per se.
Yes.
That's volunteer.
Volunteer. And the 2 people from the state.
Don't charge a dime. That's part of their job.
Yeah, we're supposed to stop the bleeding.
Yeah, well,
That's a good question, though. No more cash outlet. And then you get us free for 2 years. The Auditor of State's office is free for 2 years. And then after, 30 months, then you start paying some. And after, it's like a gradual thing. So ideally,
First 3 years.
get in and get out.
That's our goal.
Yep.
Okay, all right. So, I'm sorry, did you have another question?
Yeah, well, it's more of a comment. The generalization of this is 2 different plans, basically. One, if we increase revenue, and one, if the revenue doesn't increase. Like in the fall, we're going to put something on the ballot. So hypothetically, if that doesn't pass, then we have to come up with an additional plan to figure out what the cuts are going to be.
Something different. Yep.
So in general, it's 2 plans altogether. Because if you don't increase the revenue, you're still faced with a deficit.
That's true. You have to come up with something to
Right.
reduce that deficit.
So you have to say how you're going to increase revenue, and then also if that doesn't pass, then how you're going to eliminate the cost.
And the best idea is if you have a revenue generating plan and you don't feel good about it passing in November, or you just are hesitant to maybe already start working on those cuts, to have them in the back of your mind or talk about them so that you're ready.
Or another revenue.
Yeah,
item,
or different revenue.
Something different.
Go ahead, I think Bill has seen it.
What happens in the case that appropriations are passed at whatever level of control that is set, and then those appropriations aren't followed, they're overspent. What happens, like, council can only control the appropriations, not necessarily the actual spending. What happens in a case like that, where appropriations are passed, they're blown by, and then appropriations are simply amended afterward to supposedly make up that difference? Is that, I see that being a problem. What can be done to fix those kinds of things?
Well, ideally, your appropriations are within your revenue. If you increase your appropriations, you better darn well have revenue to cover them, right? So in no time should you be deficit spending. So if your revenues are going up, it's definitely possible to increase those appropriations, but you always have to keep an eye on those revenues because it's the driving force. It's not against the law, if you will. You'll get cited in your audit if appropriations exceed, or I'm sorry, if expenditures exceed appropriations, you'll get cited. If appropriations exceed your estimated revenue, you'll get cited. But other than that, there's really nobody that's going to.
Can I speak?
Oh, yeah.
In some instances, in some cases, in some cities that we have been in this situation, once that plan is in place, if appropriations are exceeded, we show findings against the finance director, because that's the finance director's job to say the buck stops here. You don't have appropriations, we can't do it.
It's pretty serious.
I'm serious.
Good, thank you. We appreciate all of the time you've taken. Are you going to be here tomorrow then as well?
No, we weren't planning on it.
Okay.
We're probably somewhere else tomorrow.
Okay, all right, just checking.
One last question.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, Tony did have a question as well.
Basically, we're just looking, and it's more of a comment and a question for Irene, with you having some input. Basically, we want to keep a healthy general fund. So we want to make sure the general fund doesn't have a deficit. If some of the line items may have a deficit, we still have money in the general fund to cover those line items, if I'm saying this all correctly. Yesterday, we had two almost conflicting ordinances, and I just really wanted to just get your opinion. And one was, we have a lot of things that we assess on property tax, and one of it is garbage collection. I understand that some people very passionately want to keep that in a special fund so that it's only being used for garbage and for us to pay the vendor. The other the other piece of legislation was to move it out of that fund and to move it to the general fund in order to cover expenses so that we didn't have to keep loaning the other fund, if I'm saying this correctly, money, which would be like held. And something, okay, you get what I'm saying? I'm trying to struggle with this because I'm not a financial person. In your opinions, which would have been the better way for us to go in order to help us either on paper or, because the money's still there, it's just where it is. So in your opinion, what would be the best move for that? You can both answer.
I like it when we can both. Personally, this is just me, I like to keep it in its fund, because then you know if you're collecting enough to take care of what you're spending, okay? That fund right now has a deficit on the books, I believe. So let's see what happens this year. Are we collecting enough money to pay the bills that are coming in the door? It's an assessment. Delinquencies, I don't think it's different in Maple where everywhere else where delinquencies are growing. People might not be paying their taxes, might not be paying things. So let's get a grip, let's get a handle on what's in that fund, what it takes to run that operation, and what monies are actually coming in, and let's see how that flushes out. I would keep it separate.
I agree. If it was me, I would want to see a couple years at least worth of numbers to say what comes in. If $100 comes in and 90 goes out, great. that extra $10 could help the general fund. But if 100 comes in and 110 goes out, then you're just hurting general fund. So I think to keep it isolated, at least for a time period, to know exactly what that fund can accomplish, to me would be the best.
Good answers. Go ahead.
You mentioned that our appropriations should not, possibly cannot, in the future, exceed our estimated resources. That number, is that the number on the official certificate of estimated resources from the county?
Yes.
So for 2014, that total number is 18.5 million, if that's correct? Would you take a look at that and let me know? That's the,
There's 22 million
22,
on
okay.
both pages.
all right.
But we look at that on a fund-by-fund basis. We don't look at it in total, so.
Yeah, and I would caution you, just, accountants are very conservative. Sorry for those that aren't, but we look at, least I do, and I think we both, you've got 3 columns in the middle: general property, local, and other. Those are monies coming in the door that year. I would try not to exceed those monies coming in the door. That's your driving force. For instance, your, what fund is this? Computer fee fund is getting $25,000. I wouldn't accept appropriations that exceeded $25,000. I don't know if you have your amended certificate in front of you, but the 3 revenues coming in, those 3 columns, add those up for each fund, and then your appropriations. And I'm sure Irene's pretty cognizant of that too, of staying within those revenues.
So it should be at a fund level?
We look at it each fund.
So the general fund here lists $9.8 million of estimated, no, 9.2. So then we shouldn't spend in the general fund more than 9.2, the number that's listed for each fund here.
Look at your 3 columns there for the general fund. Property tax, what that's doing, it's including the beginning fund balance. And like this gentleman here said, you can't make that all go away in 1 year. So that would include your beginning deficit, and I really don't think that's feasible. So I would look at your 3 middle columns.
To not increase the deficit.
Right.
So just look at the revenues, not necessarily the unencumbered
Correct.
balance at the beginning.
Yeah, in a perfect world, you'd look at that ending balance, but in the situation you're in, like you said, you can't fix it all at one time.
What if the situation is such that we may say that we cannot, it's not possible to operate the general fund on whatever this is, $11 million. And we have to appropriate $12 million. What would happen? We'd increase the negative balance. What would happen? What would be happening, and then what would happen?
Well, you're in financial trouble. If it keeps going and your deficit spending, what's going to happen? You're going to run out of cash. That's what would happen. You would end up not being able to pay your bills.
I can tell you what will happen since you're in fiscal watch. If that would happen right now and you continue to overspend your revenue, you'll go straight to emergency. I can tell you what will happen.
On a fund level or the overall level?
Your general fund is your largest fund, so we're going to look at that general fund because your general fund is responsible for all the deficit funds.
So keep it healthy.
Keep it healthy, please.
Got it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Appreciate
Thank you.
it.
Nice meeting everyone.